Good morning, friends. I love to read biographies and autobiographies simply because of my habit of poking nose into people's life. Yesterday I finished one more autobiography, of course, the most interesting one, readable, and it just kept me engrossed in the book. And that was Aubrey Menon's autobiography, The Space Within the Heart. My friend, I believe that the authors or the writers, I think they should not have no any religion or should not have believe in one particular religion. Simply because they should be able to make up their plot themselves and then build upon his their thought or their story. Aubrey Menon's autobiography is surely a very interesting read. Nevertheless, when it comes to himself, the author of 27 books, turned Roman Catholic in his 40s and died in the faith in his home, Trivandrum or Thiruvananthapuram. Aubrey Menon was born in London, my friend. His father, a Carolite, was studying medicine there. In the hospital in which he was attached, he ran into a pretty Irish nurse, fell into love with her and married her. And Aubrey was their only child. Neither of his parents cared much about any religion and were actually somewhat upset when their son wrote to them from Rome that he decided to be baptized. No food for thought comes here, friend. And he writes in his biography, what brought about this change of his heart in the mind of a sensitive writer who had nothing sacred is told in his autobiography. Much the best book he has ever wrote and one of the most memorable autobiography, friend, I have read so far. Aubrey first novel, I had read his first novel also, The Prevalence of Witches. That was beautifully written account of his stay with the Dangi tribes of Maharashtra during World War II. He had spoken the war, he has spent the war years broadcasting talks and plays for the external services of All India Radio. A beautiful book. Now, in his biography, he mentioned about his first book and the circumstances of his relationship with the tribals and reporting to the of the World War incidents to BBC. He writes in his biography, makes no secret of it in his autobiography that he was a homosexual. He writes he had affairs with women, including tots, before his sexual preferences become exclusively male. What evidently contributed to the change, he writes, was his mother, who became flagrantly unfaithful to his father and even tried to seduce him. He writes that I first became aware that my mother had carnal thoughts about me when I was just about 16. At the age, my mind was lively enough, but as for my body, gangled with the best, and my face had an unfinished looks. As though it had just been unwrapped from damp rags of a sculptor who was not feeling his best. He's right that he was not attractive to anybody except his mother. 17 years, as everybody knows, is a long time to be married to the same man. Especially when a woman finds that the onset of the middle age has done no great havoc to her looks. He writes that my mother began to cast around for an adventure. She became exceedingly hospitable to visiting Indians, particularly students. I chanced upon her one day sitting on the knees of one of these, a handsome dandy. I was not upset. I held very advanced view about sex. In fact, I held very advanced view about everything. But I imagined that my father would be furious. Now, this sort of writing, I think, is done to see that each reader remains involved and he cannot afford to put the novel down, the biography down. Then he further goes on writing. Then, after a terrible row with her husband, she came to her son's bedroom for solace. She told him, "Your father is jealous of you, his own son. Why shouldn't you love me? Why shouldn't you?" She impressed him passionately. He gently broke out of her arms on the excuse of getting her some brandy. When he came back with it, she had stretched herself on the bed, with her skirt drawing up to bare her shapely legs and thighs. Imagine, this is the autobiography. Aubrey says he did not yield it to his mother's incestuous desire for him, but it obviously left a deep psychic impact on him. He writes that sex forms a very small part of, actually, in his autobiography. It is essentially, what he writes is the search for his inner self. And despite his Catholicism and reading a Christian theologians, he come closest to the finding his answers in the Upanishads. But ultimately he could not be satisfied. He said it is something like peeling off external layers of onion one by one. And he says the best is that he spells out the practical steps to discover one's true identity. He said the best moments are those, or best time is then to realize and explore yourself, to know yourself, is that when you have had a serious setback in life, like death of someone very close to you, or rejection in a love affair, and then it's is the time to go off alone. He writes that you cannot find yourself amidst other people. You merely find them, not yourself. He writes. Essentially, you got to be in state of solitude, not loneliness. Loneliness is a negative word. Solitude is a positive word. When you start enjoying the loneliness, you are in a state of solitude. He says that you are best alone in your own room, on your own bed. He writes that I can only say that the space within the heart seems to be some core of consciousness, which had been overlaid by all the necessities of living, and it may be the core which sustains us against all the changes and chances we must suffer from the day of our birth and even before. In the second part of his autobiography, the chapter "Is It All Right" is further interesting. that I would definitely like to share with you. Is It All Right is the, as I said, second part of his autobiography, which he wrote when he was told that he had only a few months to live. He had stricken with oral cancer and was in his mid 70s. He tried to overcome the fear of dying, but he could not. He could not find answers in any of these scriptures, whether Catholics or Upanishads or any other. Ultimately, finally, he came around to the point of view of Epicurus. It says, "Death is no crown of ours. For when we are present, death is not present, but when death is present, we are not." A good read, very interesting, and different from other autobiographies I've ever read. Thank you very much.